Welcome to another episode of Crime Scene X. Today's story is about 3 terrifying true high school horror stories. Sit back and enjoy. It was a Friday afternoon, and the high school was buzzing with excitement for the upcoming weekend. Students were chatting about plans, teachers were wrapping up their lessons, and the atmosphere was generally light and carefree. But in one corner of the school, things were different. One student, Tim, was sitting alone, scrolling through his phone, completely detached from his surroundings. He had always been a loner, a socially awkward teenager who found solace in the darkest corners of the internet. Lately, Tim had become obsessed with a disturbing subject, the Columbine killers. He had spent countless hours researching the event, watching videos, reading manifestos, and studying the killers' motives and methods. His obsession had turned into admiration, and he started to see them as heroes. He had even begun to emulate them, wearing similar clothing, and writing dark and twisted essays that alarmed his teachers. On that particular Friday, Tim's obsession had reached a boiling point. Something had snapped inside him, and he had decided that he was going to follow in their footsteps. As the final bell rang, and students began to pour out of their classrooms, Tim walked to his locker with a determined look in his eyes. Inside, he had hidden an assortment of weapons and a carefully planned manifesto. Meanwhile, Sarah, a fellow student who had noticed Tim's strange behavior, was becoming increasingly worried. She had seen some of the things he had been looking at online and had overheard disturbing conversations. Something didn't feel right, and her intuition was telling her that she needed to act. In a state of panic, Sarah approached a teacher and shared her concerns. Though skeptical, the teacher agreed to report the matter to the school's principal. Back in the hallway, Tim was ready to begin his dark mission. But just as he was about to make his move, the school's PA system crackled to life. "Attention students and staff, this is not a drill. We are going into immediate lockdown. Please follow the standard lockdown procedures and await further instructions." The announcement sent a wave of confusion and fear through the school. Students and teachers scrambled to lock doors and take cover, not knowing what was happening. In the main office, the school's administration was working with law enforcement, who had been alerted by the concerned teacher. They had seen enough evidence to take the threat seriously, and the decision to go into lockdown had been made. As the school went into a state of emergency, Tim's plan began to unravel. The element of surprise had been taken away, and he was now trapped inside the school with the police closing in. In the classrooms, students huddled together, fear and uncertainty in their eyes. The sound of sirens grew louder as law enforcement surrounded the school. No one knew what was happening, but the atmosphere was thick with dread. In the chaos, Sarah found herself trapped in a classroom with Tim. He was pacing the room, his eyes wild, and his breathing erratic. The next hour was a tense and terrifying standoff. The police were negotiating with Tim, trying to get him to surrender peacefully, but he was spiraling out of control, ranting about his heroes, and threatening to unleash violence on anyone who tried to stop him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the police managed to apprehend Tim without anyone getting hurt. The lockdown was lifted, and the school was evacuated. The aftermath of the incident was a whirlwind of media coverage, counseling sessions, and community meetings. The school had narrowly escaped a terrible tragedy, and the entire town was left reeling. As for Tim, he was taken into custody and eventually found guilty of multiple charges, including terrorism and possession of weapons. He was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, where he would receive psychiatric care. Sarah was hailed as a hero, her quick thinking and willingness to speak up having potentially saved countless lives. But she was left traumatized by the event, forever changed by the knowledge of how close they had come to disaster. The high school moved on, but the scars of that day remained. Students and staff were more vigilant, more aware of the darkness that could lurk in even the most unexpected places. The story served as a reminder of how easily obsession can turn into madness, how thin the line between admiration and fanaticism can be, and how crucial it is to trust our instincts and speak up when something doesn't feel right. In the end, it was a tale of horror that didn't need ghosts or supernatural elements to terrify. The real horror lay in the mind of a disturbed young man, driven to the brink by an obsession with the darkest parts of human nature and the close call that a small-town high school had with tragedy. Growing up in the quaint town of Preston, life was simple and familiar. The whole town functioned like a large extended family, with community events, local sports, and a shared sense of belonging. That all changed during my senior year at Preston High School, when Kyle's behavior escalated from typical high school bullying into something far more dangerous. Kyle had always been known for his pranks and taunts. He was the class clown, and everyone seemed to tolerate him as just a part of life in our small town. However, in our senior year, something shifted in Kyle. His pranks became more pointed, his words more venomous, and he targeted me specifically for reasons I never understood. His behavior began with subtle jabs, like bumping into me in the hallways or mocking my appearance. But as the weeks turned into months, his actions became more malicious. He would corner me, threaten me, and make every effort to make my life miserable. Friends noticed, teachers began to worry, but no one seemed to know how to handle the situation. Kyle's family had influence in the town, and any attempt to discipline him seemed to fall flat. His parents would wave away concerns, insisting that their son was just being a typical teenager. As the school year wore on, the bullying intensified. Kyle's obsession with tormenting me consumed my daily life. I would find threatening notes in my locker, hear whispers of nasty rumors he had spread, and endure relentless harassment both inside and outside of school. Then came the horrifying night that would change everything. Walking home through the woods, a path I had taken countless times, I felt a sudden chill, a sense of impending danger. Before I knew it, a masked figure was upon me. Though he wore a mask, there was no mistaking those cold eyes. It was Kyle. He attacked with a ferocity I had never seen before. I fought back, but he was relentless. His hatred seemed to know no bounds, and it was clear that he intended to do more than hurt me. He wanted to kill me. By a miraculous stroke of luck, I managed to escape, fleeing through the woods and finding help. My physical wounds would heal, but the psychological scars were deep. I reported the attack to the police, who launched an investigation. Slowly but surely, evidence began to mount against Kyle. His behavior in the months leading up to the attack, his obsession with me, and a growing list of other incidents painted a chilling picture. Despite his family's influence and a complex legal process, Kyle was eventually arrested. The community was left reeling, struggling to reconcile the image of Kyle, the high school bully, with the evidence of what he had become. The trial was grueling, and the lack of direct evidence made the case challenging. However, the cumulative evidence of Kyle's pattern of behavior led to his conviction. He was sentenced to a year in jail, a punishment that some saw as too lenient, considering the gravity of his actions. The impact on our small town was profound. Friends, family, and neighbors were left questioning how well they truly knew those around them. The innocence of our community was shattered, replaced by a lingering fear and mistrust. For me, life would never be the same. The memories of that terrifying night in the woods and the long legal battle haunted me long after Kyle was behind bars. I had to find a way to rebuild my life, to move on from the fear that had consumed me. High school was never meant to be a place of fear, but fear is what our small community felt as the year unfolded. It began with the arrival of a new teacher, Mr. Thompson. At first, he was well liked by students and staff alike. Young, charismatic, and engaging, he had a way of making even the dullest subjects come alive. I had him for English, and I must admit, his passion for literature was infectious. But as the weeks went by, something about Mr. Thompson began to bother me. It was little things at first, lingering looks at some students, offhanded comments that seemed out of place, private meetings with students that ran late into the evening. My friends brushed it off, saying I was overreacting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I began to pay closer attention, noticing the way Mr. Thompson seemed to favor certain students, always girls, often those who seemed vulnerable or troubled. The red flags became more apparent when one of the girls, Emily, started to change. Once vibrant and outgoing, she became withdrawn, her eyes shadowed with something I couldn't quite place. She was spending more and more time with Mr. Thompson, working on what he called a special project. When I tried to talk to her about it, she brushed it off, but I could see the fear in her eyes. I knew something was wrong. I took my concerns to the school counselor, detailing everything I'd seen and heard. The administration launched an investigation, speaking with students, teachers, and even Mr. Thompson himself. A week later, Emily disappeared. The town was in shock. Search parties were organized, and the police were called in. They searched Mr. Thompson's house, his car, and the school itself, but there was no sign of Emily. Days turned into weeks, and the community's fear grew. Mr. Thompson was placed on administrative leave, but there was no evidence linking him to Emily's disappearance. The school was a place of whispers and glances, the trust between teachers and students irrevocably broken. Eventually, Emily's body was found in a remote area, miles from town. The evidence pointed directly to Mr. Thompson, and he was arrested. The trial was quick, the evidence damning. It was revealed that he had a history of predatory behavior, a pattern of grooming and manipulation that he'd perfected over the years. Our school was left to grapple with the reality of what had happened. We were forced to face the fact that someone we'd trusted, someone we'd looked up to, had been capable of such a horrific act. The hallways were forever changed, the innocence lost. We were left with the chilling knowledge that evil could hide behind a friendly smile, that it could walk among us, undetected, until it was too late. Thanks for watching.